Well, kia ora, everybody. Good morning to all of us who are joining us from Aotearoa, New Zealand or Australia, and buenos tardes y boa tarde to all our attendees from Latin America. It's wonderful to have you with us. My name is Matthew Omar. I'm the director of the Latin America Centre of Asia Pacific Excellence, or as we like to call ourselves, the LATAM Cape. But in case there's anyone on the call who doesn't know us, we were created 6 years ago to help New Zealanders engage and do business with Latin America, to know more about Latin America too. And so we've developed a suite of innovative programs and acclaimed resources to help us achieve those goals. We're entering our final months of government funding, so our work will soon come to an end, but not before we've left some final legacies that other actors and future organisations can build on. Now, high among these legacies are the research reports we have commissioned to highlight underexplored and potentially transformative aspects or possible elements of New Zealand's relations with Latin America. Now, I'd like to show you first a couple of those reports just to give us some context here. First of these reports is on New Zealand and Latin America. It was written 2 years ago by Sense Partners. Just checking we're sharing the screen okay? Apologies for the delay there. One of these days I'll get the technology right. Okay, we are now about to share that screen. So previous screen, please. Go back. So 2 years ago, beg your pardon, we produced a report with Sense Partners on the trade relationship barriers and opportunities for New Zealand and Latin America. And just 5 months ago, we also did a report on lifting our sights, which is about diplomatic and multilateral collaborations. So those are the first two in the series. Next month, we've also got a couple of other reports that we'll be launching together on Australia, New Zealand and Latin America, and New Zealand, Latin America, and the Pacific. But today we're here to talk about a report which is about New Zealand's economic resilience. Common to that report and all four of the reports that we've either presented or about to present are the ways that they're informed by a carefully selected group of expert advisors from academia, business, and government. And that's certainly true of the report we're about to launch today. And you'll hear from the panelists who have generously agreed to contribute their thoughts today. But there was a wider team, and before we begin, I'd like to briefly acknowledge them. They include the Ambassador of Peru, Sir Peter Gluckman, Tracy Hopapa, Stephen Jacoby, Paul Gestro, Professors Alan Brent and Jorge Saad, and Jennifer Berg. But let's get on to today's topic. How did it come to be chosen? Just some context. A year ago, New Zealand's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade published a strategic foreign policy assessment about the strategic environment affecting New Zealand and helping it prepare for the longer term. The report identified 3 big shifts in the international order that our foreign minister actually referred to again last month. First shift, from rules to power. Second, from economics to security. And third, from efficiency to resilience. Now, this report you're about to hear about is a response to the third shift. It looks at the drivers of economic behaviour and how building greater resilience and addressing pressing social and sustainability needs has become more urgent. In this shift, MFAT argued, countries and corporations are increasingly concerned about the resilience of markets and supply chains and access to strategic resources. And as part of that shift, sustainability-focused market forces are strengthening, and environmental factors will be increasing focus of business decisions. So we read this and we concluded that a study of Latin America's potential contributions to New Zealand's shift from economic efficiency to resilience could grow New Zealand's awareness of the importance of Latin America to their future. It could also uncover new opportunities for New Zealand exporters or officials to work with Latin American counterparts, third country companies or actors, on common approaches to supply chain and sustainability problems. So we put out a request for proposals, and in October, we selected Allen+Clarke to undertake this research. So to present the results, I now invite our two speakers from Allen+Clarke, Jackie and Otis, to take over the seminar from here. Please introduce yourselves, the wider team, and what you did and what you found.
Kia ora. Thank you very much, Matthew, for that introduction. So my name is Jackie Hagland, and I'm a senior consultant here at Allen+Clarke. And I was the project sponsor for this work. And I'll just let Otis introduce himself before I introduce the rest of the team.
Hey everyone, my name's Otis Boyle. I'm a senior consultant at Allen+Clarke, and I was the lead analyst for this project.
And I'd also like to reference the work of Jess Anderson, who was the original project manager for this work, and also Jade Watanabe and Eloisa Fretes, who undertook much of the research that has informed this report. I'm trying to... there we go. Hang on, let me just get this right. So before we have a wider discussion with the panelists, we'll briefly talk to you about the research that we conducted over the last few months on the contribution that Latin America can make to New Zealand's economic resilience and sustainability. And as Matthew mentioned, that's with a focus on supply chains and clean energy. Following this webinar, the Cape will publish our report, which is the culmination of the research and identifies several opportunities for collaboration with Latin America. Our presentation today covers the key findings that are included in our executive summary and also gives you a brief overview of the methodology that we used. Our research was primarily informed by a review of around 140 documents and also supplemented by interviews with the advisory group who Matthew just introduced. The report itself includes a comprehensive reference list with a number of hyperlinks where they are available. And one of the things I will say is that this is an ever-moving space, and Matthew and Craig were regularly sending us articles that were identifying new changes and new information. As Matthew has already mentioned, the MFAT report, Navigating Our Shifting World, a strategic foreign policy assessment, helps us to understand our strategic environment and prepare for the longer term. In October 2023, the Latin America Cape commissioned Allen+Clarke to explore the contribution that Latin America can make to New Zealand's economic resilience and sustainability, with that focus on supply chains and clean energy. While we were conducting this research, the New Zealand Productivity Commission conducted an inquiry into the resilience of New Zealand's economy to supply chain disruptions. So very much a relevant focus for this work. Part one of our report focuses on strengthening New Zealand's supply chain futures. Supply chains are known as the tangible and intangible links that support the flow of resources from raw materials to end users. The movement of goods is fundamental to the functioning of the economy, which is obviously in turn impacts the New Zealanders' quality of life. In recent years, rising geopolitical tensions, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the increasing prevalence of climate-related disasters have brought supply chains to the forefront of political and economic discourse. This chapter on supply chains is supported by a conceptual framework which is adapted from numerous studies that emphasise the importance of building supply chain resilience. Supply chain resilience through flexibility, visibility, and collaboration. This framework provides the structure to the discussion of the opportunities for New Zealand's trade with Latin America to grow or to reduce if traditional supply chains are disrupted. You see? Sorry, we'll get the tech right in a second. There we go. Our research found that the effectiveness of global supply chains is reliant on robust and adaptable transport networks. As a geographically isolated island nation, New Zealand's supply chains are particularly vulnerable to global and regional disruptions. The economic impacts of these disruptions can be reduced by resilient transportation systems with multiple options to connect suppliers and consumers. Diversifying transport networks to Latin America and joining larger global value chains, or GVCs, could reduce transportation costs and transit times, establish more direct links to new and existing markets, reduce costs for exporters, improve visibility of our supply chains. Initiatives to strengthen sea and air connections, such as the Southern Link and Southern Cross, provide opportunities to address these issues for the benefit of both New Zealand and Latin America. Latin America also presents strategic competitive advantages for New Zealand's supply chain resilience. Through proximity to the United States, Latin America countries like Mexico are appealing destinations that can serve as natural transit points for goods entering or leaving the United States. New Zealand also has an opportunity to capitalise on its robust trade and diplomatic relationships, experience within the Indigenous consultation space, and reputation as an open, transparent, and sustainably minded country. Evidence suggests that over the past 15 years, New Zealand's trade has become more concentrated, posing a risk to the future of supply chain disruptions. While New Zealand businesses operating in Latin America have largely set their sights on larger economies, our report includes a case study of New Zealand business Convita, which shows that there is untapped potential in smaller markets such as Uruguay. Similarly, the ability to innovate and diversify export products and services could enable the New Zealand economy to better respond to dynamic national and global contexts. With a combined GDP exceeding $6 trillion across 20 countries, Latin American markets have a rapidly growing consumer base that New Zealand could capitalise on. Suggests Sorry, wrong one. Apologies. Finally, our report underscores the importance of leveraging data and relationships to enhance supply chain resilience by facilitating improved information flow between businesses and government. Real-time tracking and sophisticated analytics tools can provide greater visibility of supply chains and enable more informed decision-making and effective risk mitigation for New Zealand and Latin America supply chain networks. And now I'll pass to Otis, who will talk us through the clean energy section of the report.
Sorry, give me a minute, Tim, just getting control of my mouse. So addressing the challenges of economic resilience overlaps closely with other policy objectives, including sustainability and climate change. We structured this section of the report around the World Energy Council's Energy Trilemma framework. The Council developed the trilemma as a concept to understand and address the complex challenge of achieving a balanced, sustainable energy system. This framework is built on three interconnected dimensions that collectively define the resilience of energy systems: energy security, energy equity, and environmental sustainability. The trilemma is a useful framework as it is used by governments all over the world. Council also publishes an annual report which assesses how well countries around the world are meeting the energy trilemma. New Zealand's current ranking is 9th in the world. In comparison, the closest performing Latin American country is Uruguay, which is ranked 21st in the world. So the energy security dimension highlights the importance of energy policies that make the most of domestic resources while diversifying and decarbonising energy systems. Latin America possesses some of the largest reserves of raw materials and metals crucial for the clean energy transition. For example, the lithium triangle, which covers Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile, holds approximately 50% of the world's lithium resources. There are two key opportunities we identified for New Zealand in our report. First, by helping to implement ethical sourcing methods, New Zealand can secure access to ethical supply chains. Second, if New Zealand can support the region to move beyond mining raw materials to processing and production, it could gain direct market access to the clean energy technologies needed for the transition. Similarly, there is potential for New Zealand to leverage its research and development capabilities in the mining sector. Establishing closer relationships to the mining sector in Latin America could also help to secure access to the clean energy technologies derived from the critical minerals. The environmental sustainability dimension relates to efforts to decarbonize and diversify energy systems. While hydropower is the foundation of Latin America's electricity system, there are significant growth prospects for other established alternative fuels, including solar, wind, and geothermal. Similarly, green hydrogen is emerging in New Zealand and Latin America as a viable alternative to electrification for decarbonizing critical, hard-to-electrify applications such as long-haul heavy transport. Finally, the energy equity dimension reflects a country's access to reliable and affordable energy. The environmental, social, and governance, or ESG framework, is becoming increasingly important within trading relationships. For Latin America, ensuring ESG practices are met will be essential for the viability of its mining sector. This focus is an opportunity for New Zealand to strengthen relationships within the region due to our reputation as an open, transparent, and sustainably minded country. Establishing emissions trading systems with Latin America is also an opportunity to strengthen the energy equity dimension of the framework. To meet New Zealand's ambitious Paris Agreement targets, the government has agreed that New Zealand will need to cooperate internationally to access offshore mitigation to avoid significant economic and social disruption. By engaging in collaborative emission reduction efforts with Latin American countries, New Zealand can access a broader range of low-cost mitigation options. This diversified approach can help stabilize energy prices and reduce the need for more expensive domestic mitigation measures, ultimately contributing to a more affordable energy landscape. And finally, collaborating with Latin America offers New Zealand a pathway to greater economic resilience and sustainability. Building this relationship with Latin America will require deliberate, sustained effort. Therefore, it is important to encourage greater discourse and invest in educating businesses and the wider public on the relevance for Latin America, for New Zealand's supply chains and renewable energy transition. This webinar is one example of a way to encourage greater discourse and help New Zealanders increase their understanding of Latin American markets. The final section of our report includes further ideas for how government leadership and active engagement from businesses, Indigenous communities, and academic institutions can pave the way for a more resilient and sustainable future for both regions. The key opportunities the research identified for the way forward include the importance of prioritization and strategic direction, the importance of continued efforts around international diplomacy, the need to grow and strengthen business networks, recognizing the role of Indigenous communities, the opportunities presented by educational and research exchanges, and the need for government to collaborate more closely with industry networks. Thank you.
So thank you, Jackie and Otis. Before we get into the panel, anything more you'd like to say on top of those slides, or should we just go straight to the panel?
We'll go to the panel, and then that gives us more time to respond. Lovely.
Thank you very much. Well, it is time for the panel. Firstly, thank you both for the very succinct presentation of the report. At the end of this hour, we will actually direct you to where you can find the report online, but that's a really succinct presentation of its two main thrusts, supply chain and clean energy. But so, as I said at the start, The report was informed by a panel, and 4 of the people you're about to hear from were on that panel, and the 5th is always the outside lens we like to bring on such occasions. So without further ado, may I thank these people for being with us today, but also for their earlier comments on the first draft and for being interviewed. Shamubeel Eaqub, an economist and regular contributor to New Zealand media, government and business sector discussions on economic and strategic matters. Rhianon, New Zealand's NZTE's Trade Commissioner to Mexico, Central America and the Caribbean, an acting regional director. Dr. Paul Buchanan, former colleague of mine at university, director of 36 Parallel, former intelligence and defense policy analyst, consultant to US government agencies. He specializes in comparative politics, international relations, and security. Patricio Giusto, political scientist, member of the Argentine Council of International Relations, and director of his own company, Diagnóstico Político in Buenos Aires. And Giuliana Silveira, our outside voice, CEO of the Latin America New Zealand Business Council. Thank you all for being part of it. I'm going to ask everyone a couple of general questions which they've seen in advance. The panelists have all seen the report in advance as well. And then I'll ask some individual questions and hopefully we can interrupt and have a free-flowing discussion. So firstly, before you read the report, to all the panelists, and I can see most of you on my screen. I'll try and see all of you in a second. How would you describe the shift from efficiency to resilience as it's been played out both in New Zealand and in 1 or more Latin American countries? So who would like to go first? Maybe I'll go first because I can see who's on the screen. So we'll start with Shamubeel. How have you seen the shift from efficiency to resilience being played out in New Zealand, and if you're able to comment on Latin America?
Thanks, Matthew. I think it's long overdue. So New Zealand has for quite a long time prioritized trade for the sake of trade without understanding the longer term implications in terms of geopolitics and resilience. And I think the events of what has happened post-GFC, through COVID, and through the rise of global conflict tells us that New Zealand has to think about things very differently. So to me, I think we're a bit behind the curve from many other countries, but it's very welcome to see this shift coming from MFAT, but also the work that you have been doing and others have been doing. I think we're seeing the same kind of shift happening within Latin America, but in a very uneven space. As the report notes, the Latin America as a collection of countries is simply a collection. The reality is they have very specific individual politics and policies, and that is rightly so. But Latin America presents one significant opportunity for New Zealand that I think we have ignored for too long, which is its proximity to the huge market of Northern America, but also Latin America as a destination in and of itself.
Thank you, Shamubeel. Rhianon.
Thanks, Matthew. So I'll start with Latin America. I feel that Latin America as a whole, if I talk about that as a whole first, it faces a number of economic growth challenges across its history. However, recently, amid increasing geopolitical and economic complexities, I truly believe that resilience sits at the core of Latin America. So if I think about resilience in Latin America, I think that it's something that Latin America kind of rides the wave of constantly. So just that's sort of one comment that I wanted to make in regards to Latin America. For New Zealand, I agree, post-COVID, New Zealand economy had no choice but to build more resilience. And I think fundamental to that, and where New Zealand and Latin America kind of cross over, is that diversification of markets piece. It's one way, it's not the only way, but it's one way that New Zealand can build resilience. And I think that Latin America presents a really interesting diversification opportunity for New Zealand. It's not the right fit for every company, but I think it's a really good fit for some companies targeting some sectors, and presents a really interesting opportunity, but perhaps one that's not really well known, which is why I think this is a really interesting discussion that we have today. I think New Zealand exporters have a range of risks where building more resilience has become a greater priority in the last year. One of them is our distance to market being just a really huge risk, and looking to shorten supply chains. If I take one theme that we're touching on today, and I think about that in terms of, you know, where I'm sitting right now in Mexico. You know, if I go to any business forum in the last year here in Mexico, nearshoring has been the #1 topic that's been discussed here in Mexico business forums. And foreign companies have been looking to establish some sort of manufacturing arrangement in the country to target the US market. What I think's been interesting is that New Zealand companies have also been open to evaluating that possibility. Not every company, but we've certainly seen companies taking a look at that opportunity, and I think that's really interesting.
That's great. Well, see, we've already had a comment from one panelist, Shamubeel. Were you going to respond to something that Rhianon just said, or should we hold that off for a little bit later?
I think let's go around.
Okay, let's go around. Okay, Patricio.
Thanks, Matthew. Well, I think we are facing a transition that has a very clear strategic direction from New Zealand's perspective, as it was mentioned before. I think it looks like both the government and the private sector in New Zealand have acknowledged the shift from efficiency to resilience as a top priority, and that is remarkable given the current geopolitical and economic global context. But on the other hand, in Latin America, as it was also mentioned before, you know, we are a very complex and diverse region. Unfortunately, we are not a unique entity that you can deal with. You have to deal with each country, and that, of course, complicates the situation and the perspective we have. This is something that I had the opportunity to discuss with the authors of the report, and you can see this when you read it. But broadly speaking, as the report highlights, there is no doubt that Latin America has a huge potential to help New Zealand in this shift towards resilience, and we can see it is a win-win situation for those Latin American countries that are already taking advantage of this great opportunity. And in the case studies that are included in the report, you can pay attention to this.
Thanks, Patricio. Paul. No, I can't see Paul. Is Paul still with us here? Okay, let's go to Giuliana.
Thank you, Matthew. I think most of the panelists have already touched on the shift that has been happening in New Zealand and Latin America. And since COVID-19 and with the increase in geopolitical tensions, the concept of resilience has gained immense traction globally. Both New Zealand and Latin American governments have had to review their economic policies to prioritize resilience. And I think in a way, New Zealand and Latin America, they are not dissimilar in the way that they realize the need to diversify trade relationships and strengthen their domestic industries. As we know, here in New Zealand, we have a new government that has an ambitious target to double the value of exports. As Mr. McLeay said, they will try and do this by pursuing quality trade agreements and increase the number of trade missions to open door for New Zealand exporters. And as we saw last week with the release of the 2024 budget, the New Zealand government is really focused on rebuilding the economy and shifting to resilience, basically to ease the cost of living, but also investing in infrastructure for growth and to withstand natural disasters. including a more resilient healthcare system. When you look at Latin American countries, the shift towards resilience have been triggered by similar challenges, really. And as the report had highlighted, the region was one of the most impacted by COVID-19. Since then, the different governments, it's very difficult to mention Latin America because of all in terms of different countries. So as a region, I think there is they have promoted collectively the need for innovation. Take Brazil, one of the leading countries in the region in producing unicorn startups. And I think they are aware that to shift that dial towards resilience, there is a need for increased regional cooperation. But as we know, Latin America is a complex region, so the implementation of resilience varies a lot from country to country. And that is the key question. How will they implement the shift towards resilience?
Thank you, Giuliana. Now, I was going to ask Paul here, but Paul, I'll just let you disconnected a bit. I see you here now. We'll give you time to get into the flow, but I'll ask everyone else another question first. How has the report influenced your views on the matters being discussed in it, supply chains and clean energy futures? Was there anything particularly valuable or surprising that you discovered? And so let's go reverse order. Giuliana, let's see if we can remember the reverse order. I'll do my best here. Giuliana.
Just wanted to say congrats on the report. It's always excellent to have research available like this to highlight the numerous possibilities of how New Zealand and Latin America can engage and leverage from one another, in particular supply chain and clean energy. I think for me, there were no surprises really, because the Latin America has been going for 27 years, and we know the potential that the region can offer to New Zealand as a key trade partner. Our membership has demonstrated how New Zealand exporters have succeeded in the region. I mean, the report has highlighted the success of Sequent, Fisher and Paykel Healthcare. They are all members of the council as well. So we have been hammering home for years the benefits of accessing the Latin American markets and how New Zealand can complement the Latin markets with New Zealand services and products. For me, the most valuable contributions were to highlight the scope of the opportunities, but if I could be specific, the concept of having a supply chain information hub with real-time tracking systems and sophisticated analytic tools between New Zealand and Latin America would be a game changer to better understand the movement of goods, mitigate risks, and avoid bottlenecks. And in regards to clean energy, it was great to highlight the opportunities with alternative fuel technologies such as geothermal energy and green hydrogen. The opportunities and collaborations in that space can offer both New Zealand and Latin America just endless opportunities.
Thank you very much, Giuliana. Now, it's just been drawn to my attention that people are starting to ask questions in the chat, and they're starting to answer as well. We'll get on to those in a little while. Let's go around first, though, to how others. Patricio, what was particularly surprising, valuable, or thought-provoking about the report from your point of view?
Yes, I think the report provides thorough details about several fields of cooperation. You wouldn't find many reports like this if you search right now. So I think it's been remarkable how the authors managed to investigate a lot of cases, relevant case studies in different countries, and this is very valuable from our Latin American perspective. I think it's conclusive in its findings and the way these cases are presented to illustrate the potential of engagement between New Zealand companies and Latin America's counterparts within these areas of economic resilience and sustainability. And it is also valuable to me how this report describes that the way forward also comes with tough challenges that need to be addressed. I would like to mention just one. that I consider critical, which is the need to facilitate more educational and research exchanges like this one, something that is related to other of the challenges that identified in the paper that is international diplomacy. I think it will be sad if this great work ends up being an isolated contribution. So I think we have a lot of work to do from now on to promote this research in our political, business, and academic circles in our countries.
Thanks, Patricio. Now, Paul, I see you've raised your hand. Welcome to the conversation. Sorry we couldn't connect you before. Great to have you here. We're just asking people, we earlier asked them to talk about how they see the shift from efficiency to resilience being played out. You can comment about that too, but the question was about was there anything in this report which surprised you found particularly valuable? So looking forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, good morning to everybody, and sorry that I came in late. I was having troubles here on the west side of the Waitakere is getting connected. The report definitely, shows a lot of opportunities available to both sides of the Pacific. But I would like to point out that this move from efficiency to resilience is actually part of a larger global transition that is going to lead to a systemic realignment, not just geopolitically, but economically as well. And the move to nearshoring and friendshoring is evidence of that. And I think we need to think that you can reconcile efficiency and resilience. There seems to be this idea that you can be one or the other, or partially one and partially the other. But I think one way to look at it is to see resilience as efficiency, to look at the opportunities available in resilience, and then go from there. That this transition that I'm speaking about is not just geopolitical. People would assume
you're just getting you're just gone muffled there, Paul. Sorry about that. You went staticky. Just the last 10 seconds.
Okay, I was saying that people might think that I'm just interested in the geopolitical transitions, given what I do for a living. But actually, we're having a transition, if you will, in business models. That is to say that there is a literature out there on types of capitalism, variations of capitalism. And to put it succinctly, there are different ways of doing business. The Chinese do business in a certain way. The Americans do business in a certain way. The Argentines do business in a certain way. And New Zealanders do business in a certain way. They are not always compatible, and oftentimes they're very competitive. And so that, I think, has to be factored in as to who the competitors are, how do they approach business competition, and then formulate strategies to develop partnerships and linkages that take into account not just that, but also then the issues of political risk and governance that are integral parts of any investment strategy and any partnership arrangement. So in that score, I found that the report was a little light on those, again, owing to my perspective on things, but certainly in terms of opening our eyes to opportunities and what I would call generally the resilience sector in a transitional moment. See, I think of it as fluid dynamics. We are in a moment where Latin America, as well as New Zealand, as well as the rest of the world, we're transiting to parts unknown. And there's a multitude of ways in which this transition is being evident, but the outcome is not yet evident. And so if we want to build some assurances into the system by establishing these linkages, then we have to embrace the uncertainty inherent in a transitional moment. And we have to think about the different business models that are now being applied to Latin America and see where a Kiwi approach actually fits and if it's a disadvantage when doing so.
Well, thank you. That's a great segue into the specific question I was going to ask Rhianon. How are New Zealand companies already responding to this transitional moment? Can you give some examples from your work leading the resources and energy sector?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, post-COVID, we obviously had a really real big shift in how companies could approach our work here in Latin America. They couldn't even travel to the market, and we had a range of companies that were either wanting to test market opportunities, product market fit, or we had companies that had relationships in place, but they couldn't, support those relationships to the way that they wanted to. So without talking, in the report, there are specific cases that are mentioned, and I think that it gives some good examples of companies that have done things over the period. But if I talk specifically to what we were doing in the resources and energy sector, in 2020, we developed a sector program. It had the objective to accelerate business development for those companies and mitigate the challenges that they were facing, but also the challenges that the companies were facing across Latin America. So what we recognized were that there was huge investment from foreign companies into the resources and energy sector across Latin America that had a range of challenges. And when we started to understand what some of those challenges were, we started to see that there was an interesting linkage between the value proposition of what New Zealand had to offer and what those companies' needs were. And what we were looking to do was provide access for our companies to the right networks and relationships with relevant stakeholders to help them generate leads and also to position New Zealand technology and innovation whilst they were unable to travel to the market. Now we've been working with that program now for 4 years. It did start with the mining sector, but we realized after the first year that our technology and expertise actually had a really strong application to the challenges in Latin America, also in the energy and infrastructure sectors. And the report touches on opportunities in energy and infrastructure as well in Latin America. So I'd say mining, minerals, energy, and infrastructure are three verticals that I think New Zealand has really strong opportunities in across Latin America. So many of the companies we were working with had value propositions applicable across those sectors. In some countries in Latin America, we've dialed up a little bit the activity in mining, and others the opportunity was stronger in energy or in renewables. It really depended a little bit on the policy environment in a particular country, and there's where my panelists have talked about the nuance in particular countries across Latin America. We might see opportunities in a macro level being, there, but then the nuance, and how that plays out in a particular country might be a bit different. And I think that, much of what the report outlines about the key themes that Latin America is struggling with is, they go through their own clean energy transition. I feel that presents really interesting opportunities for New Zealand business. And the important piece here for me is that those opportunities are not one-off. The companies have to be committed. Us ourselves, we've had this strategy now for 4 years. We're constantly, building those relationships and connections long term. This is the sustainable business in Latin America, is not about, coming in and one night wonder. You need to invest in building those business relationships. And the successful companies, without talking to specifics, which, people can read about some of those examples in the report, but I think that those successful businesses have been doing this. They've been building face-to-face relationships, investing in business models like Paul's talking about that are sustainable and are relevant to the sector and the needs of their customers and their target market, and figuring out what is that right business model to unlock the potential that market presents.
Thank you, Rhianon. I mean, I agree with all that. It's interesting, we talk about sustainability. This report was about ecological and economic sustainability, but we also have to have sustainability of interest from New Zealand and from companies and from government. And
that's not a one-night wonder.
That's not something we always get right. Shamubeel, do you want to comment on that? Because I noticed you've been talking about that in some of the chat. You've been answering some of the questions in the chat, so thank you very much. But to the oral conversation, opportunity, and how good is New Zealand at sustaining interest, and what can we do?
Yeah, look, I think in some ways it's about the philosophy of how it's done, philosophy of the process of it. I think people think wrongly that it's driven by politicians. Foreign policy in New Zealand is not driven by politicians, but by public servants. So the reality is that where MFAT is at the moment is a pretty good place in terms of rethinking New Zealand's position in the world. So I'm quite heartened by that. So it actually gives us that framework for why New Zealand will think to expand its relationships and grow its relationships in places like Latin America. And I think as the report has highlighted and as the conversation so far has highlighted is the opportunity for us in Latin America is a little bit about as a trading partner, quite a lot of it as a gateway, and quite a lot of it as a hedge against geopolitics and uncertainty. And so to me, those things are those bigger things that Paul talked about, for example, that this is about the realignment of the global order that we're talking about. And New Zealand can either do it deliberately or it can be done to us. The challenge for me when I think about the issues that were also highlighted in the report was when you think about the barriers that New Zealand faces in terms of Latin America, one of them is very much, Matthew, as you mentioned, is the lack of sustained interest. We have heard about Latin America as a place that's going to be this big thing for New Zealand, and it's fleeting interest that has kind of come and gone, in part because I think it was driven by politicians and not by the officialdom, the backing of the policy and the public service. For me, when I think about the opportunities in Latin America, there are kind of three kind of elements that I think about in terms of drivers of prosperity: geography, institutions, and culture. When it comes to geography, Latin America absolutely makes sense in terms of connectivity and closeness. There's in fact already pretty reasonable connectivity through shipping. We have very poor connectivity when it comes to air. So people movement is very weak, but goods movement is very strong. When it comes to institutions, the two countries, the two regions are very different. New Zealand is a cartoon neoliberal country, and Latin America is a hodgepodge of lots of different, very volatile, very unpredictable political systems. So I think there is a really big challenge there where the experience is very heterogeneous, and what is true for Mexico is absolutely not true for Argentina or for Brazil. So I do struggle with the Latin badge as a whole because it describes such a wide range of countries. And as a result, I think sometimes it's hard to maintain that interest because sometimes we mean Uruguay, sometimes we mean Mexico, sometimes we mean some other country. And so we get lost in what we actually mean by the opportunities in these countries. And very quickly on the third thing that is really critical, and one that I'll be really saddened to lose with the closure of the Cape, is the understanding of culture. The culture is one of the biggest drivers of connection between people. Trade does not happen between countries, but it happens between businesses and between people. And when it comes to culture, New Zealand culture is so different from Latin America. New Zealanders are reserved. We don't say what we mean. We hide things. We like to be polite. We like to rub along. And not true, again, universally for all Latin people, but the reality is that the way business is done there, as Paul mentioned, is not the same as how it's done here or how it's done in China. We learned how to do business in China, and it took us a long time. And we have to do the same in terms of learning how to do this in Latin America. So for me, it's really about how are we going to learn about those 656 million people who live in Latin America and the way that they think and talk and feel. Because unless we have that ability to bridge that gap between how we think about ourselves, the country of 5 million people, the 656 million people are not going to change for us. So we are the ones who have to learn. We are the ones who have to upskill ourselves. And that's why the work that Rhianon and other people do is so critical, is being able to create those connections locally between people, between businesses, making those cultural connections stronger. So to me, this report, the conversation we've had is very much about all those dimensions. And the reason I think why we found it hard to maintain that substance and durability of interest is one, because it was driven by politicians versus the public service, which I think has been resolved. But two, I don't think we've been specific enough about which countries and which specific opportunities we want to leverage. I think we need to be much narrower in which countries in Latin America we want to target, and much narrower in those specific things around resilience and geopolitics being the main motivators in motivating and sustaining that interest over time.
I'll invite now Patricio to respond to what Shamubeel just said, because you're from a country which is through a change of leadership has gone from sort of being off the table for some businesses to sort of flavor of the month, and potentially too much so, who knows? So, you know, contexts are very specific by country. They're also specific by leadership and by time, and governments change. So you know, how would you respond based on Buenos Aires to what Shamubeel and the others have just said about opportunities and cultural and drivers of interest in those opportunities?
Thanks. Yes, we are facing profound political changes here in Argentina. You know, President Milei has initiated a process of profound reforms to liberalize the economy and attract foreign investments, focus on three sectors that are basically related to the issues we are discussing today: energy, mining, and agribusiness. Those are precisely the sectors with the greatest potential and the best competitive advantages in our country. And now there is a lot of expectation that if Milei is successful, these sectors will expand and generate great business opportunities. In relation to the topics of the report, I would like to highlight the importance of lithium. This was mentioned before by some of the speakers. We are in the lithium triangle, and it's the key role in the global energy transition of this critical mineral is well known, and Argentina has the third largest lithium reserve globally, and many international companies are already investing in this sector despite the adverse political and economic environment we've had in our recent past. If that environment finally, that business environment finally improves with Milei, we can expect a mining production boom in the coming years. I think I'm quite optimistic about this, but also in lithium-related industries such as batteries or EVs, electric vehicles. And I understand that there is already one New Zealand company providing services in the lithium sector of Argentina, and I am sure there will be room for many more if this effectively changes for good. And in agribusiness, I will say the same. We've had successful experiences in the past with New Zealand companies such as Waikato in dairy farming. And in clean energy, you know, Argentina is like a dormant superpower. All the all the alternative energies we can develop, we have a huge potential for them, and it's yet to be developed. So that is interesting for companies that are looking for new opportunities in the Argentinian market. Again, if this environment finally changes for good in terms of business. And I am very optimistic that Argentina will respond very well to the growing interest from Kiwis to partner with us in fields such as supply chains and clean energy transition, as I have mentioned. Thanks.
Gracias, Patricio. Paul, you have Argentine origins yourself here. Would you like to respond to what Patricio just said, or comment more generally on a subject I know is of great interest to you, the politics of investment? And feel free or not to branch out to geopolitics if you wish. Time is running out, so that's a lot to talk about. Oh, can't hear you, Paul. You're on mute. Paul, you're on mute. There you go.
Yeah, sorry. There, yeah, with apologies to Patricio, talking about my adopted country. He probably doesn't know my background, but in his comments, it goes to the heart of what I'm concerned about, which is issues of governance, both corporate and political. And although Milei may seem like a short-term opportunity, for business interests, both in Argentina as well as abroad, the longer term prospects are very mixed because Argentine still has reacted quite strongly against some of his reforms. And the reforms have taken a very strong toll on the Argentine public, which, for better or for worse, may have gotten used to a certain way of life that, as has been said, there's been a book that's titled this, they've been living beyond their means. And now it's time to belt tighten, do those sort of things. My point is simply this. I don't know if Milei is going to last his full term because there is a possibility of a constitutional coup against him. And B, if he's not reelected, which I don't think will be possible, then we have the possibilities of reversal. If you add to that, and reversal means reversal of at least some of his economic reforms, given who the winning coalition is likely to be. To that, we must add the federal and local level implications. In Argentina, but I'll say more generally, in Brazil, there are provincial fiefdoms, that is, states or provinces that are controlled by political entities, dynasties, those sort of things that do not respond or walk in lockstep with the central government. And so any investor has to be aware of this, in light of the competition from others who use different business models. I think that is crucial. I think the advantage that New Zealand has is that we have an international reputation of good corporate governance and good public governance. Now, we in New Zealand may, be a little skeptical about that, but the fact is our reputation precedes us. And I think that's what's interesting about this, because good governance is about the long term. You see, a lot of business interests are focused on the short-term bottom line, get in and get out. Recover your investment, get your profits, and leave. If you take a longer-term approach, where your interest is in governing transparently, having accountability to the people in the areas in which you invest, not just your own workers, not your shareholders, but literally the places where you get involved, the long-term benefits are sustainable, whereas a more short-sighted approach is far less so. So both in general...
I might have to interrupt you there, not because I'm not hanging on every word. I'm actually very much enjoying what you're saying, but I'm just conscious of the time here, to be honest. We've only got about a couple of minutes, and I think I need to give Jackie and Otis a chance to respond to this. Would you have anything that you'd like to say before we sadly have to wrap up?
Thank you, Matthew.
Paul.
Yes, no, apologies, Paul. I was intent listening to all of you, and I thank you very much for your comments, and also for the time that you took to be involved in this research and provide feedback. Look, a number of the topics and things that you've raised today are things that we identified, and it was often in the case of these sorts of things, you want to dive deeper into a number of different topics or areas, but you just can't within the scope of a report that's going to be published and have a wide sort of audience. So that was one of the things that we kind of grappled with while we were drafting the report. We knew it was going to be going to a lot of people that had very, very deep knowledge in specific areas, but also we're aware that that was not the purpose of this report. The purpose of this report was to provide an overview of key issues or key challenges, and kind of give people some direction. And so that's one of the key reasons why in our reference list we've provided hyperlinks to pretty much all of the research to try and provide people direction to where they can go and find further information. Now, I think it was Giuliana who made mention of nearshoring. So nearshoring, onshoring, friendshoring, and reshoring were all topics or concepts that we came up against as we undertook this research. And so the things that we've delved a little bit more deeply in the actual report, but definitely something that businesses do need to keep in mind if they are looking to to export into Latin America. One of the other things too, I would just like to say is, yes, that topic of culture and of differences between the different countries. That's another thing that we really would have loved to have been able to go into more depth. We have included, I think there's 5 case studies within the report. And yeah, really it was a real tricky thing of how do we try and give that little bit more depth into some of those concepts or some of those issues, or why is this country or this topic or this business different from others, and how can we provide an insight into that and give an overview. So yeah, just look, thanks again. I could also talk for another 5 minutes or so just in responding to your comments, but I just wanted to make those high level comments. Thank you.
Well, I think it is important now that I share this. Can people see the slide that I'm showing now? Let's have a quick look here from current slide. Can people see the slide? That's great. This is where you can find the report. I'll just keep it on here for 1 second, just so it's the lead item there. Unfortunately, I have to. Second. Yeah, that's so this is the report here. So if you can have a look at it further, it's actually my sad task to wrap this conversation up, because I think we're just beginning to get going, really. Memo to self, next time make the webinar 90 minutes, but that might not have attracted as large an audience as it has. May I just take this opportunity to thank you again. Firstly, thank the authors for responding to being really flexible throughout the whole process, being clear in their vision, to being responsive to feedback, and for producing a really clear and conversation opening final report. And this is the phase 2 where we talk about it, and phase 3 is over to everyone who reads this report and who sees the webinar recording. We will send this out in about a week or 2. It takes that long to download it, and then we'll send it out to everyone. Please share the report. Please share this conversation. We really have just opened the subject, and so apologies to you all there. Apologies, Giuliana, I couldn't get back to you. I know your members are doing great work in this area, and that you may be following up on behalf of the Latin American New Zealand Business Council.
They are indeed. I will highlight this another time, but there are a lot of great members doing good work in this area.
That's marvelous news. Well, look, thank you all those of you who have contributed from this morning, from yesterday afternoon in Argentina. Thank you all for your conversation. Apologies we could only just start, but I really appreciated your insights, and spread the word and look out for our next webinar in a month's time on Australia and the Pacific. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Gracias.